People love to come on here and talk about their favorite language apps, especially when they claim that a certain language app taught them how to learn a language in like 30 days. In this video, we're going to do something a little bit different. My name is Jamie, I'm a language coach. Let's talk about language apps I'll never use, and not because there's necessarily anything wrong with them, but because I don't like them. And if you're new to my channel, I'm a big supporter of using resources to learn a language that you actually enjoy. On that note, the first language app I'll never use is Duolingo. Look, Duolingo is very, very fun. Problem is, it's too fun. And by that, I mean I get way too sucked into things that don't actually matter to my language learning. Duolingo has absolutely mastered gamification, motivation, addiction. They've mastered getting you to commit to using the app every single day forever. And while it might keep you hooked, what it won't do is it won't teach you how to have conversations. It won't teach you how to actually use the language. So in my experience and the experience of my clients, this becomes a lot of anxiety and stress, plus a lot of frustration when you realize that you're not actually learning the language, but you're also afraid to lose your streak. And personally, it feels really icky to me. It starts off fine enough, giving you some basic knowledge and getting you to recognize patterns, and it's better than nothing, right? But I know, at least for me personally, starting with Duolingo is a really slippery slope to getting addicted to using the app and then not being able to use anything else because I'm so focused on winning the competitions and avoiding losing my streak. Basically, Duolingo is really dangerous for me, so I cannot use it. The next language app I'll never use is Anki. If you're not familiar with Anki, it's a study app. It's not specifically for language learning. You can use it for any topic. And years ago, I used to love Anki because it was the first one, at least as far as I know, that really used SRS well, which is spaced repetition. So basically what that means is that instead of having flashcards where you're going through every single word at the same time, the same amount of times, no matter how easy or difficult that word is, Anki was the first app that I found that taught me how to put away the easy words and focus just on the difficult words. Now, this is still a top tier way of learning vocabulary, but Anki is no longer the only or even the best way to accomplish it, especially for language learners. In fact, pretty much any app these days that teaches you vocabulary uses spaced repetition to do it. There are various ways of going about it, but basically everybody else has caught up to the strategy. The other reason why I wouldn't use Anki anymore is because I was learning vocab words that I didn't actually need. And there's a reason for this. As I said, Anki is not specifically a language app. It's a study app. So basically, if you are trying to become a lawyer, you can use Anki to learn legal terms. So for example, if you go onto Babbel or Busuu, both are excellent for learning vocabulary with spaced repetition. Babbel and Busuu will provide you with vocabulary that you need to learn. Anki, however, needs you to provide the vocabulary that you want to learn. And this is fine in some cases, but in a lot of cases, especially if you're new to language learning, this can be really dangerous because you're not sure which vocab words to learn. I've been in the habit of looking at my textbook and assuming that I need to learn every single word there is. Not realizing that just because a word is there doesn't mean I have to learn it. And in fact, if I'm learning words that I'm never going to use, that's a waste of my time. It's more effective for me to learn words that I plan to use in the future. So all those months that I learned how to talk about roller coasters, like I remember how to say roller coaster just because it was an interesting word in Spanish, but I've never actually used it in Spanish, and I probably never will. But because with Anki, I was the one who decided which words were going into my Anki deck and which words I was learning, and I didn't know any better. I spent more time focusing on those words than I did like literally any other topic that I would ever talk about or am interested in talking about. Regardless, these days, if I even wanted to use something like Anki, it's not nearly as aesthetically pleasing or easy to use as something like Babbel or Busuu or any number of language apps that uses spaced repetition. Other apps are so much more functional and enjoyable and easier to use that I wouldn't even bother with it anymore. Next on the list of language apps I will never use is Pimsleur. If you're not familiar with Pimsleur, link below in the description for my review of Pimsleur and every other app that I've mentioned so far in this video. But you may have heard of Pimsleur before just because it's a really old and classic language app. It's basically audio lessons where you listen to somebody say the words, say the phrases, maybe explain some of the pronunciation or grammar points, and you repeat the phrases to yourself. Personally though, I get so bored. It is really slow and really monotonous and I zone out. I'm a very visual person and there is nothing visual about Pimsleur at all. Plus, I watch my YouTube videos at least 1.5x, like sped up a little bit. Pimsleur is very slow, it's like a lullaby for me. There's not really any captions on any other supplemental materials because it is there just to improve your listening comprehension, basically. It is meant to be an audio lesson and that is it. Pimsleur was made in like the 80s, I think. I don't know. I have the exact dates below in my blog post review of Pimsleur. But Pimsleur has not updated at all with the times, and they are very proud of their methodology and of the doctor, I believe, who created the methodology. But for me, it's just not as engaging as some of the other options there are out there. So I would rather go for something like Language Reactor or LingoPie, which is still listening because you're watching videos and learning the language through videos, but it's much more engaging because not only is it video, there's something for me to watch and be visually entertained by, but there's also subtitles and captions, which really helps me to grasp the language. Because the worst thing that you can do to your language learning is force yourself to use a strategy that is boring. Because if it's boring, then you're not actually going to want to do it. You're going to be forcing yourself to do it. And then if you're forcing yourself to do it, then it's not going to happen. Remember, my channel is all about enjoying language learning and making sure that the strategies that you're using are effective for you. On that note, the next language learning resource that I will never use for my own language learning is story learning. If you're not familiar, again, link below in the description for my review of story learning. The basic premise is that a language teacher has a short story that is meant specifically for beginner language learners, and you learn the language by taking apart the short story. With just the one short story, you learn vocabulary, you learn grammar, maybe some pronunciation, things like that, but it's very focused on reading. And for me, personally, it is the least engaging thing at all. For one, just like with Pimsleur, I need something that's really engaging. I need to engage multiple senses. And for me personally, for my way of learning, story learning just does not cut it. Second of all, one of the big things that I personally dislike about story learning is there's a whole lot of trusting the process. And while there's a whole lot of trusting the process in general with language learning, story learning is different because it's so much more intense. I mean, one of the things that I do with my clients a lot of time is teach them how to see the progress they're making. Even if it doesn't look exactly how they expect it to look, it's still progress. With story learning, that progress takes so much longer. You basically go from understanding absolutely nothing whatsoever to understanding the gist. But I personally do not have the patience to spend hours on something that I don't understand whatsoever and waiting for things to just kind of like make sense. Now, that's not to say that the process doesn't work, because logically it seems reasonable that the process does work, but not for somebody like me, not for somebody who needs to learn the way that I need to learn. And while the story learning concept is fairly new to the online language learning market, the concept isn't. It's graded readers. You can look up graded readers and find books where it's one language on one side, one language on the other. This concept has been around forever. So if you do enjoy that kind of method, but you want it a little less intense and you don't want to exactly pay for a teacher to take you through it, because you can just read story by yourself and learn the story through just like a regular story, there are other options. Now, the last language app that I will never use personally is Preply? I'm not sure how you're supposed to pronounce it. Preply is one of a handful of platforms that language teachers use to find students. You go onto the website, you search for the language that you want to learn, and you get populated with a bunch of different language teachers who are there to teach you the language. This is no different from something like Verbling or Italki, which are both much more popular and much bigger. The difference here that I personally can't get on board with is how the teachers are paid. Now, this isn't a strategy issue as much as it is an ethical issue, and that's something that's really important to me. The vast majority of money that you spend on Preply teachers goes directly to the platform. And while I understand that it costs money to run a platform, I personally don't feel comfortable with spending money on a teacher, but the teacher getting zero of it. Literally, if you do a trial lesson with a teacher to meet with them for the first time, you will be paying for their time but they won't receive any of that money. All of that money will go to the platform. Clearly, some people must be okay with it, or else it wouldn't exist and people wouldn't be teaching languages on it. But I personally, I do not feel comfortable with that. I would rather pay the money and have it go directly to the teacher. Like I said, I am totally okay with a percentage going to the platform, but not 100% of all proceeds going to the platform. And if you go to the website, you can see there's a whole like ranking of they have to like, a prep teacher has to work with you for like 200 hours or something crazy like that to get the majority of the money that you are paying. And I am not okay with that. And that is why I would much rather go to something like Verbling or Italki or somewhere along those lines to find a language teacher. Now that is 5 language learning apps / resources that I will never use for my own personal reasons. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree or disagree with any of these things, because the idea of this is that these are not hard and fast rules. These are my personal opinions and my personal needs as a language learner, which are different from yours. And like I said, if you are not familiar with any of these resources and are interested to learn more, links below in the description for my in-depth reviews of all of them. And if you're looking for a more personalized approach to language learning, like I showed you in this video, I really recommend you take my free quiz linked below in the description as well. Basically, it'll give you a handful of questions, and based on your answers, it'll give you personalized recommendations as to what to do next in your language learning, whether it's being a little bit kinder to yourself or committing to a strategy or any number of things. But if you found this video valuable, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when I post a new one all about how to learn languages every Wednesday. And in the meantime, make sure you take that quiz. See you there.